Hello and welcome to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host today. We are at LeadingAge, Georgia, 2022. We're sponsored today by AG Roads and by Experience Care. And today I'm excited to talk to Chris Keysor. He's the president and chief executive officer at Lenbrook. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Chris, before we hit record, you started to tell me some amazing story, and I interrupted you immediately because I realized it was going to be way better in person than it was for us getting a little bit more comfortable before we went going. I usually go around and ask you a little bit about Lenbrook and how you and what it looks like, but I want to get into your initiation story into long-term care right away because I find that fascinating. Take me back to the first time you heard of long-term care, the first time you stepped inside of a facility, and then maybe kind of that aha moment where like, oh, I really like this. So maybe I'm going to be a lifer.
Right. Well, I do think it's interesting. In fact, I think this most interesting question you're asking in that when you hear kids talk about what do you want to be, you hear fireman, doctor, jet pilot, you don't hear CNA. You don't hear senior living professional. In fact, one time I asked my management team, how many of you all knew you were going to go into this field? And only one person raised their hand. Everybody else came in for a different reason, and it was more happenstance than anything. I was just graduated out of public accounting and worked at Pete Marwick, and my first client was a nursing home. And when I went in there, I did my job or whatever. I was very low on the totem pole. But as I continued to work in the field, and I had other places I could work, insurance companies, food companies, whatever. But when I was in the long-term care setting, working with the folks, the providers, and working with the team I was working with, I just started realizing they were good people. And I gravitated towards that in my career, and I've been there for 30 years now.
So I often find that, as we get older in age, myself being 41, I have those aha moments, but I'm not able to verbalize them. When were you able to be like, oh, I was gravitating to these seniors. I was gravitating to the caregivers who take care of our senior community. When were you able to explain the words like you just did?
So I started out working in nursing homes, which fulfill an incredibly important role in our society. But the moment I realized I was where I wanted to be was when I started working with life plan communities, which Lenbrook is a life plan community, where you get folks earlier in their life. They're going through a journey of aging, and you can impact that journey. And so I started seeing what we were able to do for folks and the impact we create and the ability to then take them through the rest of their journey together was pretty exciting.
So this is my first time being at a convention by non-for-profits, and what comes up over and over is the focus on mission. And me coming from marketing, I always think, oh, like it's a story, but I think they're one and the same. What about your story at Lenbrook or your mission at Lenbrook keeps you here, keeps you grounded, keeps you excited going to work, keeps you coming to LeadingAge, Georgia?
All right. Well, I do think our mission is probably one of the most important things we do, in that we're basically a living laboratory around our mission statement. So our mission is to enable our residents to enjoy the gifts of independence, good health, personal fulfillment. No matter how old you are, you're a 16-year-old kid being handed a set of car keys and saying, go forth, and you're an adult, to when you're aging. Independence is one of the most important part. Personal fulfillment. It's what we're all about, right? And good health is often the way you get there and live a healthy, well life until the end.
Do you have any personal stories that either you've had a resident tell you that they felt like that they were part of that mission and you felt like your organization was, fulfilling that role, or you heard it from a caregiver who said, thanks, Chris. Thanks for making sure we're here, that we were here during COVID, or thank you for taking care of 2 generations. These were my cousins, our grandma. Any memory that stand out for you? If you were, if tomorrow were your last day on earth and you wanted to say something to your children saying, this was special and this is why I dedicated so many years of my life to this.
Well, there's so much. One of the great joys of working in senior living is the residents, these experiences, their life journey, the wisdom that they have. And there's, they say a lot of funny things. So the funniest one I heard was right when I came to Lenbrook, somebody said, Chris, nobody wants to be 90 unless you're 89. And it just shows the importance of wanting to continue to thrive and live a vibrant life. But the one that I think is most meaningful, and I hear it pretty much every week at work, and it keeps me going, is people say, I should have moved to Lenbrook 10 years ago. And what I think that is a sense of community, the ability to use community to live a vibrant and engaged life that you simply can't get out in your single family home somewhere. And so to me, the ability to create that community, to create the environment around that community, to leverage everything we are, community, from fitness to socialization to support when somebody needs community. I've even heard it referred to as, I need to be there early so I can create my tribe. So whatever you want to call it, community, tribe, it's about support when you need it.
What was the biggest learning curve for you? I know when I became a CNA, let's go back, 20 years, when I became a social worker in the HIV homeless community, my friends who didn't understand social work thought the biggest learning curve was going to be the emotional toll on me. That wasn't it. I felt like I was a taker. I felt like I was going home invigorated from what I was learning. What was your biggest learning curve? Might be bureaucracy, it might be PDPM, it might be HR, it might be the emotional.
Yeah, I think coming back to where we've just come from as a world around COVID, it's amazing how much disruption and transformation has occurred, including in ourselves. I come out of COVID and I say there's two things I learned in COVID. One is, when I eat a cheeseburger, I want it on a plate, fresh off the grill. I don't want it in a styrofoam container. We all eat, our favorite foods in styrofoam containers, and it just wasn't the same, right? We all ate alone. And that's really the second point, is I understand more about the value of socialization and in the model around community than I ever have in the past. So for me, the learning exercise was taking those two aspects. I want social engagement. I want the experience. And then realizing that at Lenbrook, it was my team that I work with day in and day out that brought that forward. And at some point in this crisis, I started saying, I am more proud to work with this team than any other team I've been at, whether it was at a big six accounting firm, or whether it was at a smaller accounting firm, a development firm. It didn't matter. The team that I've worked with over the last couple of years are dedicated, loyal, engaged. They put themselves, behind everything else to get here.
Speaking of team and even community at the larger, in a larger sense, yesterday, when Kathy Perry was talking about that we need as leaders to feel comfortable celebrating success. I thought, well, I've been talking to executives like yourself for a year and a half on LTC Heroes, and leaders are really good at celebrating other people's success, but not their own so much. So I'm going to ask you to take off your humble hat and talk about something that you've done well in the last year, 2 years. It doesn't have to be COVID related. It could be an amazing hire. It could be something that you did internally, like you became a different leader, something that you might not feel comfortable talking about in your religious community because you're supposed to be humble. Between me and you, what's something that you can be proud about?
Yeah, between you, me, and the thousands of people right there. Well, I think if we all reflect back to the last 2 years, I think everybody's going to come out of COVID a little more proud of themselves, period. I think it's been a hard couple of years, but we've learned a lot about ourselves, and hopefully we're savoring that a little bit. For me, I really believe coming into COVID, you come into a crisis with what you have. You can't build anything else. You can't get anything else. What you have is what you're going through that crisis with. And I was amazed at how we responded to it. And we actually had a $100 million expansion going through at the same time as COVID. Through construction, we opened it in October of this year, and we had no delays in the process. We kept going with everything anybody needed us to do, and just a little bit more. And that was really a good feeling at the end of the day. We as a non-for-profit, and you talk about mission-based organizations, the true value to me of a mission-based organization is not just what you do, but how long you're going to do it. And I think our job is to remain relevant as long as we can remain relevant. And whether it's an expansion or it's taking care of folks during a crisis or just good financial sustainability measures, whatever it is, it's making sure that we're relevant far into the future. And I think that's what differentiates a mission-based versus a for-profit.
When I was preparing to come to LeadingAge, it was happened through Deke Cato of AG Roads. And, thanks to him that I'm here. And I was speaking to him and Jenny Helms, and I said, what can LTC Heroes do for the convention? And they said, anything you can highlight to help change the perception. And one of the ways that I think that is important to change perception, I think there's a couple different ways. One of them, when I was sharing you before we hit record, which is, like me documenting how I became a CNA, breaking down those barriers. So that single mom who's thinking about doing something and she didn't finish high school, you can become a CNA. I did it when I was 41 and I was terrified. And then it was amazing. But others are, other ways are to do that is to talk about who you're going to be working with, the leadership style. And secondly, also, what are the intangibles inside of this organization, inside of this industry that we haven't been great at describing or explaining outside of it? So this is heading into two questions for you, Chris, and you can tackle them in either way. One is, what is your leadership style? Because I think that this interview in part is, if there's a 17-year-old out there or a 29-year-old out there, I want them to come work with Chris and I want them to come work with Lenbrook. So I want you to answer that. While it's just not you, there's a team underneath you and what your guys' culture is. And then the second, you spoke about how you realized when you got into your first nursing home, you're like, there's something different. I'm making a difference. Can you elaborate on what are those intangibles that you might make $1 more down at the place where you get the hamburger, the cheeseburger in a styrofoam cup, and that cheeseburger might be good, but there's something that you and I take home from our work that changes who we are. Right. Feel free to take either one of those in any direction you like.
Well, there's a famous company out in Silicon Valley that during orientation, the CEO walks in for his part on culture and he lays $1,000 on the table. And he says, after I'm done talking, if you don't believe fully in what I'm talking about, take the $1,000 and leave. And I think that's a whole mindset change that's occurred in that our current generations of the workforce are starting to realize that they need something more than a paycheck, something more than just gaining their own ego or personal fulfillment from it. It's about having the passion. It's about creating impact in what you do. And though it's about being rewarded fairly, whether that's through monetary benefits and support or just personal fulfillment as a whole. And so I actually think we're quite lucky in that we're coming into this point where people are starting to pick their careers based on what they feel good about doing, as opposed to just going into whatever has been, preordained or predestined for them. So for us, and particularly at Lenbrook, I often tell our folks coming in, I say, I don't have $1,000 to lay on the table, but I'm telling you, if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, you're never going to be good at this job. You have to have that passion. You are creating impact, and I vow I am going to make sure you're fairly compensated.
And what does your leadership style look like? And I'll let you think on that. I always describe it in the following way. I have CEO of the company I work for, Jason Long. We have 4 important values inside of the company, and I always think that there's a 5th informal value that doesn't get written on the books. Is we have a lot of fun. Right. And I think it's because he allows for us to be our own persons. What are some values that stand out for you? Maybe you don't have to, write them by the book and so for Harvard Business Review, but what's a value that stands out for you that's important? And then what's maybe one that's informal that is part of your leadership team that maybe 10 years from now, it might not be a value of Lenbrook, but it's why you all are unique today, part of it.
Mm-hmm. I think the value, our values as an organization are respect, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. I would have to look at Lenbrook and say, when I looked at the opportunity of coming to Lenbrook, and I've now been here 12 years, so it must have been, a good decision. I think the one that sticks out is teamwork, and we have an incredible team. And what is so unique about our field is that we have an 18-person management team, and that we do things for folks that I have no idea what the particulars about what we're doing. All right. So you end up having to trust your teammates in this process and know that what they do, they're really good at doing, and you just let them do it. And that goes all the way up the leadership structure. There's often times when we have a program, the hospitality program we developed ourselves at Lenbrook, the Lenbrook Way, where I think I learned it by disagreeing with almost every part of it until I saw it in action. And that gets a little bit into what I think Lenbrook really also is for me, which is an experience of serendipity. It's if you have a problem, if you keep your eyes open, your heart open, your feelings open, you'll figure it out pretty quick.
I was speaking to one of your peers from LeadingAge, Georgia, probably 2 or 3 hours ago, and I told them one of the items, or one of the things that I most love about my job, is that this industry is very human to human.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't speak to a lot of leaders who are not self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
very reflective. I want to ask you, what have you learned about yourself coming out of COVID? Personally, professionally, emotionally, physically? How did you react? And how are you different?
Mm-hmm. I want to hit real quick on another value we have, which is excellence. So respect, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. And we often say we are a person-to-person business. We're a human business, right? We're not making widgets. We're not automated in any way. We are humans doing it. And so we're very purposeful in saying it's excellence, not perfect. Nobody in our organization is expected to be perfect. You make a mistake, you have permission to make that mistake, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons and you learn from it. Then moving forward.
I'm going to interrupt. I love that. I haven't heard that distinction. I'll remember that. I guarantee a year from now, I'll be interviewing someone, and someone will either say perfection or excellence, and I'll tell them, Chris taught me the difference.
Well, and values are something that you really have to be dedicated and learn. I will often say some of our stakeholders expect us to be perfect. And you have to be able to look at the person and say, we're never going to be perfect, but I will do my best to be excellent. And then you have to be able to say to the caregivers and the workforce folks, you are allowed to make a mistake. Don't worry about it. You will still be here after that mistake, because everybody will make a mistake.
Going back to the question, to press you on it, how have you changed, or what have you learned about yourself? Have you become a better communicator, a better listener, a better boss, a better brother, a better son? What's different?
I don't know if any of those. I think more than ever, I am willing to be unapologetic on what I'm feeling and what my values are. So just like excellent, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to be perfect. I will be excellent. Respect. I want to make sure that whoever I'm talking to, I'm using the words and the story that hits them, not just to me, right? And you can feel that when you say it. Some things just don't feel right coming out, right?
I like the answer. One of your peers this morning said, I'm much better at saying no than I was 3 years ago.
Absolutely. And don't apologize for it.
Yeah. Chris, I'm going to throw some questions at you, some quotes. These are some quotes that I remember and are important to me in terms of being appreciative. I do like a 7-minute gratitude journal in the morning with my mom and my dad and my wife. We send each other texts in the morning. What are the things we're grateful for? And this quote always reminds me of that. And I'm going to ask you what it brings up for you. And it's from Ray Lewis, football player.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "They pay me for Monday through Saturday. Sundays are for free." What part of your work is for free? That it's your Sunday NFL game, and if no one paid you, you'd be happy to do it.
Well, first of all, it's no surprise that you keep a gratitude journal, because I think your favorite book is the Languages of Appreciation, right? Well, I would like to think throughout my career, I have made decisions of where I want to be, where I want to work, based on what I love. doing, right? But I think the important lesson in that, and I want to share that with everybody in our field, is you got to love what you're doing. We are creating impact, but you do need to be compensated for it. So I'm going to reverse it a little bit. I think Ray Lewis has that opportunity to be paid a whole lot of money and then just go out and thrive on something. A lot of our workforce, holds 2 or 3 jobs. And when they come to work, at Lenbrook, they're coming to work tired, right? And I think my job is to make sure that I'm getting to the point where I can compensate them fairly for what they do, and they can dedicate their whole selves to us. So they can maybe someday get to the position where they're Ray Lewis, and doing something for free and just as they love it, right?
Chris, I'm going to throw some rapid fire questions at you. And I feel like you're already prepared because you listened to mine a little bit yesterday on the main stage. But I'm going to change up the order to see if I can surprise you. I'm going to ask you, what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world? And if you want to modify it, they're thinking about entering long-term care.
Great. I was actually at a restaurant yesterday, and the server had a nice smile, was good server, good customer service. And the conversation started to, is this what you want to do for a career? And he said, no, I want to be a medical record input person. And just hearing them say it, I said, that's not what they love. There's no passion. There's no love behind that. Right. So I think anybody joining the workforce, 17 or whenever, do what you want to do and then do it really, really well. And I think that's that passion that keeps you going for the decades to come.
Chris, my next question is, do you have a favorite failure of yours? And I'll give a little bit of context. Do you have something that didn't end up as you wanted, and today it either taught you to be a stronger person, or you learned to prepare for the next failure?
Yeah. So I am a reforming accountant, and I often say, accountants are really good at saying everybody has a number, right? Well, I was talking a little bit earlier about our hospitality program, Lenbrook Way. It's being somebody that is caring, competent, and responsive, and demonstrating those values. And I said that I pretty much learned them all the wrong way. So one of them, for instance, at Lenbrook, is we all wear name tags. And the reason we do that is because we've realized that whether it's you're a resident or an associate, you want people to know your names, and you actually want to know other people's names. You can go work in a restaurant where you don't know any of the customers' names. That's not Lenbrook. We are different. When you walk into Lenbrook, people will know your names. You're part of a community, right? So I would have always said you have a number, not a name. I'm an accountant. I don't have to know names. I was wrong there. The other one, we had a consultant come in and say, good hospitality is that when somebody asks for directions, you walk them to where they're going. You don't tell them, you walk them. And as the accountant in me said, no. If every time somebody's lost down where I work, it'll take me 5 minutes. My whole day is going to be chewed up walking people. And, but the first person came down and said, I'm lost. I walked them to where they were going. And it turns out it was a brand new resident. They were still getting to know the community. They, needed to know how to get to the exit into their car. Walked them down there. Well, later on that week, I had an appointment from a new resident that had moved in, and they had a problem. And when I knew I was having this meeting about this problem, got all the information, when I walked around the corner into the meeting, and I realized it was the same resident that I had walked down the way. How did that meeting go? It was great because we had a relationship. Yeah. If I had simply given them directions, we would have had no relationship, and it would have been a confrontational meeting, right? But when I walked them down there, I had a 5-minute conversation with them. We created a relationship. And so our meeting was a good one and a happy one and a productive one, right? We furthered what we were trying to accomplish there. So I would say if you have 5 minutes to create a relationship with somebody, best investment you'll ever make.
Chris, I have to pause. In what you just said was I could feel like a visceral change. It was so cool. I felt at one moment it sounded so well crafted. I said, has he worked with a corporate public speaking coach to be able to deliver that? Because that was really, really beautiful. Like, and I told Jenny when I interview the leaders from LeadingAge Georgia, I want to be able to make these amazing professionals sound like amazing people. And that answer is one of my favorites. I really appreciate it.
Well, you hit the essence of your question is what failures have helped you grow. And the reality is that you grow through failures. You don't grow through your successes. You grow through your failures.
And we remember them more so as well.
Absolutely.
We'll wrap it up with one last question. It's one of my favorites. If you could have a gigantic billboard, Chris, anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why?
I one time was watching the Olympics. I'm a cyclist and a triathlete, and I'm watching the Olympics, and one of the cyclists had written in marker on his arm, "We will never be here again." And I thought about that because the Olympic folks, they train for 4 years, 8 years, whatever the time is, and their entire performance often comes down to seconds. And do they come through or do they not? And I thought about the fact that he chose to write that quote on his arm meant that wherever he was, no matter how much pressure he was going to have, no matter what happened that day, he was going to be present. He was going to be in the now, and he was going to be present. And I thought, if somebody at that caliber can think that way, I'm going to do that. And so now for every triathlon, I actually write that on my arm, and I just make sure for the whole 10 hours, 12 hours, I don't care if it takes 15 hours, that I'm just enjoying it.
I love that example. I was speaking to a gentleman in the hallway, Cameron, and I told him that I haven't purchased very many apps on my cell phone in my entire life because I have an Android and you don't usually have to pay for them. One app I paid for that has been life-changing is We Croak. Like we're gonna die.
Okay.
And it's the only notification that I have on my phone other than a ringer. And it interrupts me 5 times a day with a notification with an important quote to remind me of my mortality and that I'm gonna die. Wow. And it was the founder created it because he got through depression by realizing that he was going to die. And it's along those lines. We're only going to be here once.
Yes.
I love it.
And just be present and be in the moment. Yep.
Well, that is really cool. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, LeadingAge Georgia. Thank you, AG Rhodes. And thank you, Experience Care, for making this possible. Chris, it's a fabulous conversation. I hope to meet you next year. And if not, I'll never forget the conversation.
Thank you for what you're doing. It can't come at a better time for us.
Talk to you soon.